understanding history in our contemporary world. What I mean by this is how can you use history in your everyday life? There's two ways that's super important. Firstly, understanding history allows you to create a more informed and nuanced vision of reality. However, understanding how history works lets you as an individual to combat some issues, especially in our local media, that are more and more prevalent each year. So, let's start with a stupid question. What is history? Well, there's two definitions of history I want to talk to you about today. Firstly, we have history analogous with the past. This is the series of events, people, places, and things that have brought us from where we were to where we are. This is the history that you were taught in school. This is the history that history buffs are so obsessed with. However, there is a second definition of history, and this is the study of that past. Studying history is not just to do with facts and figures, but also with debates and deliberation, figuring out why these things actually happen. Within this is something known as historiography. This is the study of history. It's like an academic exam. So, let's start with that first definition, the past. How can you use the past in your everyday life? Well, there's two ways. Firstly, through understanding the backgrounds of current events. And secondly, through understanding how the past parallels the present, so that we can make better decisions for the future. Let's start with understanding the background of things. Right now, we're coming out of what is considered the most peaceful time in human history. The turmoil around the world is extremely prevalent right now. But, as the famous French historian Ferdinand Brunel once said, events are mere foam on the waves of history. Things happen for a reason, they don't happen in a vacuum. Understanding this allows us as individuals to create informed decisions about the present. Something that's happening right now, which has a much longer history than most people are aware of, is the Israel-Palestine conflict. This region has seen conflict for thousands of years. Well, the fact that it is the Holy Land for three of the largest religions in the world makes this almost unavoidable. But the conflict we are seeing today itself is not even new. Conflict for this exact reason has been happening there since the 1930s with the Arab revolts, and attempts to stop this conflict have been happening since the Oslo Accords in the 1990s. And beyond that, 46,000 people have died so far in this conflict, the vast majority being civilians in the Gaza Strip. Understanding the background of what is happening today is extremely important for us as a young generation to make decisions for the future. But how can we know what decisions to make? Well, this is where understanding parallels between the past and the present is vital. There's so many things that are happening today that have parallels with the past. If you look at Chinese expansionism into their surrounding borders, that mimics some things that we saw during European imperialism in the 1800s. If you look at what is happening right now with the American century, there are factors there that mimic what Gibbon diagnosed as the reasons for the decline of Rome. But right now, arguably the most concerning trend we are seeing is the global rise of nationalism. What is nationalism? Nationalism is to patriotism what communism is to socialism. It's an extreme. And extremes often show up in extreme circumstances. And with nationalism, the two biggest factors that I have seen to lead to it are communication and fear. What are these fears? Well, right now, one of the largest fears we are seeing is economic fears. There's about a 4% inflation rate in the world right now. In 2022, that was about 8%. But some nations, such as Argentina, are experiencing up to 200% inflation rates. Their dollar is devaluing so fast. What can we look at to draw a parallel with this? Well, in the period after the First World War, Europe was experiencing immense economic issues. From 1914 to 1920, the Italian currency went down to just 1/6 of its previous value. If you look at the German mark in 1921, it was devaluing at 41% a day. $1 could buy you 4 trillion marks. It was literally cheaper to burn your money than to buy firewood. These factors, this fear, is what allowed nationalistic rhetoric to spread, because people didn't know where to turn to. This also spreads through communication. What's another time when nationalism rose up before the First World War? During the 1860s, there was something known as the Second Industrial Revolution. This saw many positive things. However, it also saw the ability for paper and print to be produced faster than ever. This led to what we now call yellow paper journalism. Yellow paper journalism meant that ideas could be spread quickly, but it also meant that misinformation could be spread quickly. An example of how misinformation led to this nationalistic rhetoric is the Spanish-Franco War. There was no evidence that the Maine was destroyed by Spain, but it was just printed in a yellow paper journal. That led to a war that led to many, many deaths. Today, we're living in the information age. Right now, ideas can spread at the speed of thought rather than the speed of any postal system. But this also means that misinformation can be spread this fast. And the internet itself allows for echo chambers on forums, in our media, social and mainstream. So, let's talk about that second definition of history and historiography along with it. It's filled with something I like to call BS, which is bias and sourcing. Both historiography and our media is full of BS. And we need to know how to navigate that, which luckily you all learnt in school. Being able to apply our historical literacy to our media literacy will allow us as students of history to work towards a better future. So, let's start with bias. There's two kinds of bias I want to talk about. There's explicit bias and implicit bias. Explicit bias is when you do it on purpose. Let's say I didn't like Bob over here, and I was talking to John over here, and I only told John the things about Bob that I didn't like. John's going to form a pretty bad opinion of Bob. Our media does this all the time. If it was just spread fairly evenly, that wouldn't be, the worst thing ever. But the fact that large companies and individuals are buying up large swathes of our media industry means that this explicit bias is getting concentrated towards certain things. Understanding this bias can let you as an individual approach our media more clearly and critically so that you can combat it. There's also implicit bias. Implicit bias is accidental. How many of you have heard of William McKinley? What about JFK? Both of these people were American presidents who were assassinated, but we only know about one of them. It's not your fault that you don't know about this. That's just the way it is. And this type of selection bias, as it's called, it can be seen all the time in media. Why do you think that celebrity, violence and political news trumps that of scientific advancements or positive things? Understanding implicit and explicit bias together allows us to navigate the bias in our media. And these are skills you learn in history class. We've also got sources, which you guys also learned how to deconstruct in history class. My anagram, I got told, was top crew. I don't know what you guys got told. It might have been something different. I know it changes each year. But understanding how to take apart sources that the media uses lets you critically evaluate whether or not a news source is good. Because just as a bad source can destroy a historical argument, a bad source can destroy an argument in our media. But not only this, you can use your ability to deconstruct those sources, to deconstruct the media itself, understanding the perspective of where that is coming from, the context, who is writing it, and why. Learning these things about history lets you as individuals navigate our modern media. To quote another Frenchman, a French philosopher, history is the only laboratory we have in which to test the consequences of thought. You can't run a test on the entirety of civilization, but we can see what has been done before and learn from the mistakes of our forebearers rather than making those mistakes ourselves. To be a student of history lets you look towards history not only to understand the present, but so that you can look towards the future. Thank you for listening to my talk.